Welcome to the Healers Café, the #1 show for medical practitioners and holistic healers to have heart-to-heart conversations about their day-to-day lives while sharing their expertise for improving your health and wellness. So welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Russell Sturgess, and just a little bit about his background. So he learned osteopathic massage way back, I think in '74, studied remedial massage osteopathy at the South Pacific College in Sydney, and practiced in rural Queensland until the year 2000. Then he learned Bowen therapy in 1987, and that became his primary modality. He researched, he was doing a lot of research and was the first person to teach the fascial association of Bowen therapy. He also developed his own Bowen course called Fascial Kinetics. And he's taught extensively in the US way back, also in Australia and New Zealand. And currently he's bringing in an angle that is from a life work, the importance of mindfulness and exploring the current level of awareness that a healer in their doing what they're doing has, basically. So I'm really thrilled to have this open discussion with you. So thank you for participating.
It's a real delight. Thank you for the invitation. Pleased to be here with you. Yeah.
So what I feel like jumping rather than going through a lot of history. I mean, obviously Bowen was a big part of what you've been doing and sharing and bringing your own sort of understanding and version to. But what is this about, your soul journey compared to your human being journey? This it's not a juxtaposition, but how is it that you see what you're doing now as being I don't know if it's an evolution, or if it's what is going on for you at this point? Because when I talked to you 15 years ago, we were a little bit still in the hands aspect of things. And we have evolved from that. So maybe you could share that journey, because I find that fascinating.
So yeah, that's a good question, and I think it's probably the question. If you're going to ask any questions today, it's about that. Ultimately, suffering and what most people experience as their pain and suffering is the direct experience of being a human. It's a human experience that's brought about by the two faculties that is fundamentally definitive of the human experience, which is the mind, thinking, and perception, which is the senses and the way in which we engage and interpret what the senses experience. And so ultimately what we have is a reality that where we experience and interpret what we're experiencing through those two elements. And as a result of that, how we think and perceive, of course, is highly influenced by how we're programmed, by our familial upbringing and by our cultural and social environments. And so what we have is a whole lot of programs within our mind that establishes whether we like something or don't like something, what we think about something. I mean, you can have two people having the same experience and one loves it and the other one hates it. Right. So it's not the experience of life that's the reality. The reality for us as a human being is the perception or the filter that we have about the experience. There's the other part of who we are is soul being. And Soul being is our innate essence, you know, and I like to use the analogy of the blue sky. Our blue sky is our soul. It's blue, and it's like that all the time, you know. But what we have is all of these clouds of human filters that come over, and sometimes those clouds are storm clouds with lightning and thunder, and it covers up the blue sky. But here's the whole thing, is that the blue sky is always there. It's just been covered up for a moment, or for as long as we're alive, depending on what we do, with human consciousness, which are these clouds that cover it up. Every once in a while, we have the cloud separate and we see a bit of blue, and we think the blue's the cloud. And because it only appears every once in a while, because there's so much grey cloud and storm cloud around, which is the storm cloud and the grey cloud is our suffering and the things that we experience. So the interesting thing is that all we've got to be able to do is step back and look behind the grey cloud, and soul being is there. And soul being only knows one state of being, which is peace, joy, and happiness. It's its current, constant state of being. It never changes. It's always, because it's part of source, whatever you want to call infinite awareness. It's part of that. So the journey, and in fact, the journey is a very simple one. All you've got to do is step back and become the observer. And in fact, this is one of the primary skills that anyone in healing absolutely must possess, is the ability to step back and be the observer of themselves and of other people. And what that means is to be able to become aware of the facts of what's presented without giving any of it a meaning. Okay, now whether it's a healer or whether it's in life, it's having the ability to step back and just observe the facts. I have a cheeky business card that says I'm a punctuation expert, and and down the bottom I have a line that says, full stops invite God in, commas push God out. A full stop is when we observe a fact and then put a full stop in. What we do as a human being is we see a fact, but we don't use a full stop. We then put a comma, and then we use our mind and our perception to mold it into who we perceive the reality to be. And so, in fact, we're manifesting our reality constantly because we use commas.
Right.
The minute that you use a full stop, then you invite God in, or source, whatever you want to call infinite awareness.
Right.
But you invite that, because that's who you are in that place. The point at which you become the observer, that's soul essence, that's the observer. And here's something interesting. You instantly experience peace the moment you step back and become the observer. You might be in a really painful situation in terms of something that's going on, an argument, for example. The minute you step back and become the observer of the facts, then all of a sudden because the observer doesn't feel anything. It is peace, joy, and love. It actually doesn't feel anything because that's all it is. And so in that moment, that's all you experience.
Right. Well, I mean, it's like, from what I'm understanding, it's the place of experience without judgment. It's the seeing, right? But I was curious because it came to me as a question. And, you know, we talk about our vital force, right? Which some people say is also source. Is also, and it seems to have our best interest, you know, if we don't muck around with it too much. How do you see our soul being or observer interplay with our vital force, or do you think it's one and the same?
It is the same.
Okay.
It's the same. And here's the interesting thing, is that when you begin to realize that every single person is soul source, is divine source, you only have one way of turning up in the world, and that's with love. Literally. Yeah. In fact, there's only two core elements to our experience. The first one is that we're looking for happiness external, and that's where our suffering happens. We're actually looking for, in wealth, in power, in love, in success, we're looking for our happiness outside of ourselves, which is bizarre because our intrinsic self is happiness. Our soul being is that. It's in here, it's not out there. And then once you understand and have grasped the whole notion that our happiness is within, you realize that everybody else is that as well in their core being. And so then you start to turn up in the world where you actually hold the awareness that every person you encounter is soul being. And now that doesn't mean to say that you have to like what they do, but you will still love them because you know their true essence. So you don't have to like what they do in their human beingness, but you still hold the awareness of their divine essence in that place. And so yeah,
when you're in a therapeutic, position, how do you see that playing? Like, as in, do you feel that the impact of understanding that reality as the reality that you're perceiving to be the operating one, that's therefore you connect to your patient, you love your patient, and let's say that their worldview has themselves in a suffering victim mode, and from your perspective it doesn't, that doesn't gel quite, right? Because you don't see the world that way. How do you see the interchange? Like, how do you see the dynamics of that play out? Or I don't know if it's making
so you've got two elements here. You've got you as the healer, the therapist, and then you've got the client. And so you've got your stuff and your filters as you relate to it, and your agendas, and they've got their stuff that's going on. So what you have when a client comes in and they're on the table, on your treatment table, and you're about to give them a treatment, you don't just have a human being there, you have a soul being there. Now, this is the interesting thing about fascia, is that fascia is the veil between who somebody is as a human being and who they are as a soul being. And what I can tell you is that the more glued the fascia, the more suffering the person is experiencing, and the more they're immersed in their human being.
Yeah, because they're not free, basically.
Absolutely. So there's no connection to their soul essence, which means that they're in a place of suffering because all of their energy is being directed about trying to find happiness outside of themselves. So they're having painful experiences in their relationships, and they're feeling victimized, and they're feeling that they're failing all the time, and their poverty and scarcity is something that they're having to deal with all the time, and they're in pain. They're having a painful experience. So what happens is we turn up and we apply this technique and we try to fix people, and this is going to be one of the hardest things for me to get across to anybody, is that you're not fixing anybody. All you're doing is opening windows of opportunity. This is what a Bowen therapist does. And we do it so differently just about to any other modality when we're doing Bowen, because we're touching fascia, we're touching the skin of the spirit, I call it.
Mm.
When we touch the fascia, what we're doing is we're opening the veil with the curtain between who somebody is as a human being, and we're allowing them to touch their soul being. All the more reason why, if you haven't done that work yourself, you will be limited in your ability to truly serve the person you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
You, as a healer, have an obligation to understand your soul essence. Now, one of the things that you'll begin to realize is that when you move into functioning in the world from soul essence, in that place, you're inviting God, universe, whatever you want to call that, to manifest as doing what it does best, which is to love and to heal. You know, in the Christian tradition, I hope I don't offend anybody, but in the Christian tradition, I think the most important scripture was in Matthew 13, when Jesus said, if you can see with your eyes and hear with your ears, that's being the observer. If you can see with your eyes and hear with your ears, and understand with your heart, in other words, having an intention to love, I will heal you.
What would your life be like if you were pain-free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
He just gave the healing formula right there. If you can see with your eyes, hear with your ears, and understand with your heart. And so what happens is the priority of a treatment, or the agenda for a treatment, shifts from having to fix somebody to being truly present, or being truly the observer with someone. And in that place, you invite sourcing. And source becomes, because source only knows one thing, which is to heal. And so what happens is, in that place, I live in a rainforest, by the way. I'm sitting here and I'm looking 15 foot from my house. I'm off grid. I'm in the mountains. I have Australian rain. I have dingoes walk past. Literally, yesterday, I had dingoes walking past my room here, and wallabies come hopping past and what have you. But the rainforest, if you imagine it, the rainforest is divine source, as everything is. And it grows at such a phenomenal rate. I can go in and chop it back and cut it back. But it only knows one thing: abundance. And it replenishes and regrows. Well, we're chopping it back by our stories, by our narratives, by our fears, our expectations, our hopes, and all of those things. We're cutting it back all the time because of our childhood narrative. Given the opportunity, it just wants to be abundant.
Now, I agree with you, just to say. And I'm wondering, you know, in when you're in connection with another person on the table, we know mechanically some of the impacts that, that Bowen triggers, like the piezoelectric effect or all of that. We know that there's a a frequency or some, to me, it's like a vibration. Now, okay, let me give you a little caveat before, so you can see where I've come from. So I did not know that it wasn't normal or natural not to hear the body. So when I put my hands on somebody's body, I can actually hear where it's out of tune. So it was, but maybe that's my life as a dolphin, I don't know. But I had a sense that I thought everyone could hear this. So when I was teaching it, I would say to people, oh, it just sounds like, I make these strange noises because that's what I can hear. Now, do you think, and is in your experience, is it, if it is frequency that we're exchanging on some level, does that make sense that there's a continuum in frequency as well? Does any of that make sense? I've been trying to come to terms with what is this thing that, because I know it's at play, I'm not sure. It's not like, when you're working with somebody, it's not like you can tell what's wrong. So your hands are drawn to knowing what to do to allow the order to take back. It's almost like the body knows so much what to do. If you listen, you just follow the instructions, basically, right? Because the force of healing is so strong that if you're attuned and listening and seeing, you can't go wrong. I mean, you're part of this circuit. And so I'm looking at, what so much of the new age stuff, and they're all talking about, scalar energy and this and that. And I'm thinking, like, do we have something here very much similar, that we just don't have the vocabulary, or I don't have the vocabulary to explain it in those terms? Does that relate to your experience at all with this?
Look, my experience in it is knowing, is an inner knowing. It's so it's not vibrational for me, or it's not sound. It's inner knowing. So when I touch a body, it's just it's like guidance. And that was there from a very young age. In terms of just knowing where to go and what to do. But as I said, it was an inner knowing for me. So I never felt it vibrationally.
Right, fair enough.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm sort of trying to relate to that, and that wouldn't be a language around my experience.
Okay.
In that, and even for me, it was even more than just an inner knowing about the body. I would actually be given words while I'd be treating somebody about what they were dealing with at this particular time in terms of relationship experience or something that they were dealing with. I would actually be given a word, and I would use that word in the process of working with somebody, and it would unlock the most amazing responses in people in terms of tears and fear and all sorts of things, just by using these single words that I'd be given while I'd be working with people. So it was a very intuitive process for me.
But it's so that's not auditory in that sense, but it's like it's the use of the word is symbolic on some extent, obviously, but it's another way of relating, in being completely present with what you're experiencing as a practitioner. Right?
Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah.
And one of the problems, and this is one of the things that we do I'm going to be a little bit, I have a process or a program called this is called the Mindful Healer, Pathways to Mindfulness. And one of the things that we do is, are you familiar with the Enneagram?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a slightly different way of helping people identify their story, but because we do this in a group thing, I use the Enneagram to help people identify their narrative.
Right.
And, you know, if you start to look at you know, if you know, if you're a 1, which is the perfectionist on the Enneagram, for example, you're going to be totally organized, total ethical compliance. You're going to be a stickler for doing the technique. It's got to be done this way, and practice protocols all have to be done the right way. You know, it's the perfectionist. You might be the 4, which is the individualist, and you take a really liberal approach, and you just follow your gut feel, and the energy in your room is more important. You know, in terms of it, you know, and creative and how you use other techniques. And so what we have are these, on the Enneagram, these 9 different ways of approaching, which is all parts of our narrative. And of course, what happens is these things, if they're done with awareness, don't get in the way. But if they're done out of awareness, then they get in the way of what we're able to do. And in fact, they distort our capacity to really, truly be present, because we're using our mind and perception based on the Enneagram to relate to what's going on here.
Yes, yeah. No, I agree, because it's not like a thought gets involved in you if you're totally present, but the moment you explain it, like, you know, people say, well, can you give us a protocol for this or that? No, because it will depend, you know, on what's happening in the moment, you know, and even your connection to what's happening is going to be different, right? Like you said, you have 9 ways of being, you know, minimally, or in homeopathy, 500 states plus, you know. So I mean, we all come to it very differently.
But the protocol is, though, there's only one protocol, and that is to become the observer.
Right.
That is the protocol.
Yeah.
Because in the place of becoming the observer, you're observing you and the other.
Yeah.
And in that place there, you open yourself up to source as the observer. That's how we connect with observer, is through being, how we connect with source is through being the observer, using full stops instead of commas. You know.
And why is it in your mind that Bowen lends itself so well to this understanding of, as compared to, let's say, chiropractic, and I mean, osteopathy, there's so many different brands of it, it's hard to, you know, generalize there, but, you know, chiropractic has a different way of, or deep tissue work has a different understanding of all of this. What is, why Bowen is so?
Because they have an agenda. They have an agenda to fix, whereas we have an agenda to release glute fascia.
Right.
End story. We're not adjusting anything. We're not manipulating, as in, you know, we're not doing deep work to get in and release things. We're using this really non-invasive system of releasing fascia, and it's allowing the body and the soul, and that's the difference. You see, one of the things that I began to realize is that why massage doesn't do what Bowen therapy does is that it washes out the piezoelectric effect. And so it basically takes away that ongoing impact of the fascia responding to piezoelectric change.
Influence,
and so any deep work is going to do that. Chiropractic doesn't even address it. It just is manipulating and adjusting. So it's not even working it, particularly if what I'm saying and others are beginning to say is that fascia is the veil between our soul being and human being. It's the skin of the spirit. That's what makes what we do so different. Is that we're softening this veil, we're making the connection. And so in practical terms, what does that look like? That's the client coming back after the second treatment saying, well, I've done it. And you go, what have you done? I've left my partner, I've quit my job, I'm going to move house. And it's sort of like, you know, and that happened so often when I was in practice, that people would make these big life changes. Why? Because now they were listening to their soul, not their human being. They had put up with being in an abusive relationship all these years, and they've said, I'm not going to take it, because their soul says, this doesn't serve you to be here. The human being says, you're not going to be secure if you leave this relationship, even though you're going to be continually abused. At least you know you're going to have food on the table and a bed to sleep in. You know, and people will keep on doing it. You do Bowen on people, and all of a sudden you wake them up to the possibility of a more soul-filled life, which is why, as a health professional, you've got to understand what it is that you're doing when you're applying this technique. And I think that that's what is missing in the Bowen communities. People don't understand how powerful this really is at a soul level.
Yeah. Well, I certainly do.
I know you do.
And I'm so thrilled that you're making this your, you know, what you're doing now is to get that point across, because yeah, it's just, it has to go this way, because I don't know of any other therapy that is as easy and comprehensive, that can change so profoundly. So I'm very happy to have a brother somewhere, wherever you are now.
I'm in Queensland, but I'm
in Queensland at this moment. Okay. Yeah, I'm sort of traveling at this moment, but anyway. So so where can people find out more about you, like your website or your books? And then our time is up.
Yeah, well, probably the best thing to do is to go to my website, which is just Russell Sturgess, russellsturgess.com.au, and you can see the whole plethora of things that I'm doing there. I have another sort of my core business is the Centre for Western Mindfulness, and if people go to that website, it's westernmindfulness.com.au. And you'll get to see everything that I'm about and the things that I'm doing. And as you said, I've published 3 books. The third one was published by Inner Traditions, and Simon & Schuster's the distributor for it. And it's called The Spiritual Roots of the Tarot, the Cathar Code.
Oh, I would love to know more about this. Ron Fallon was talking a little bit about this when he was over in Canada, and I'm like, we should do a whole interview on this.
Well, happy to do that.
Number 2.
Because that once again, you know, I get to see things differently. That's what I do in life, is I see the world differently, and gave the tarot a whole new meaning. I don't do tarot reading. In fact, it's a deep spiritual message of transformation. In fact, it reveals how to live from soul being. That's what that was all about. And that's I'd love to have that story firsthand. But anyway, I'm going to leave you at this point because our time is up, and I try and keep them, you know, so that people don't have too many long surprises. But anyway, it's an absolute pleasure speaking with you. And thank you. I love being able to tell people about what I do.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café. If you haven't already done so, please like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on, as I post a new podcast every Wednesday with tons of useful information and tips for natural healing that you won't want to miss.